Hey, I'm Brian, and this is Vinyl Paints. Today we're going to be revisiting the 2003 Clone Wars animated series. We're starting off a little different than most episodes. What you're looking at right now is some production art that I picked up a few months ago from the Clone Wars animated series. Even though the series was not cel animated, there's still a lot of production art because it hadn't gone full digital at that point. So for all you collectors out there, there are some amazing pieces from this animated series. This is a piece of Barris Luminara, and it's just some concept art that I decided to give the cel conversion treatment to. You can see the amazing character design, as well as you can see a little bit of the blue behind it. That's called non-photo blue. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite animated series to cel paint. I think because it was so close to the transition from cel animation to digital, it actually really makes for some great cel conversions. I don't always include the inking process. Usually I end up cutting it out for timing purposes, but this time I really wanted to show it because I think this might be the first piece where I actually use multiple inking techniques or multiple different styles of inking in the same piece to create in order to create the project. So you'll see that I'm using the dip pen, but when I started doing the cape, Gendy's kind of known for having this like thick black outline in the 2003 Clone Wars series. So I really wanted to kind of match that energy, and I just found that the Posca paint pen just had these bold lines that worked well in my previous Clone Wars one, and I pulled it out again for this one. And I wanted to kind of show that, but still have the ability to do fine details as well. It's kind of interesting to look at where you are now as to where you were when you first started. I've only been cel painting for just over a year now, and it wasn't that long ago I did the General Kenobi from the Clone Wars animated series. And just looking at the Barris Luminara and seeing how I'm able to control the dip pen better around the smaller features in the face, I've really come a long way. Nowhere near where I want to be, but it's nice to see that I'm progressing. I've been keeping this record of all the different colors in order for me to be able to quickly pull out colors as needed, a little reference sheet. Unfortunately, a lot of times you don't find the colors you really need, and in this case here, I end up having to mix some colors. I couldn't find a green that I liked, so I did end up having to mix a green for their skin tones. And one of the little things I've learned, or techniques I've started to use, is when I do have to mix paint, especially for like a skin tone or that I'm going to use right away, I'll mix two batches, one for the highlights and one for the shadows. Although it doesn't always work, I found one of the best tricks to shadows is to add a little bit of brown, and that usually is a good foundation in order to get those tones that you want for the second tone. So one of the things I've started to do is I've started to put little color markers on the different areas of the painting where the same color appears. Usually this would be easy if you have like an actual fully realized Duga, or you have line art that where it shows you the shadings and colors. So in this one I just try to identify the areas that are going to be the same color, put a little mark there, and hopefully I don't end up having to re-pull out the color, or in a worst case scenario remix the color and fill it in later. I haven't really bought as much production art and animation cels recently, although as of making this video that's kind of changed a little bit. But in general, it isn't that I've lost interest or don't have a desire to add to the collection. I've just been priced out of everything. So because of that, as well as my interest also changing into wanting to make cels and to actually kind of keep this art form alive, I just haven't really been buying as much production art. And that was until recently. A couple of months ago I saw a post from Josh at Xeno Gala, I hope I'm saying that right, and he had some Clone Wars production art, which is kind of notoriously hard to find as it is, and I really like doing cel conversions, and some of the pieces he had, I'm like, these would be perfect for cel conversions. So I ended up meeting up with him and actually picking up 3 or 4 pieces. I really did decide to interpret this purple cloak for Barris. I just wanted her to have a little bit of a different feel, and I wanted to kind of, it kind of gave me a bit of a hint of Palpatine, and anyone who's followed the Clone Wars series knows that whole, Barris turn, Inquisitor storyline. So I just thought it was kind of like maybe a little bit of foreshadowing. I tried to keep it close to the original, but also, with nods to the future. One of the things I wish I would have done differently, and like I said, this is all hindsight, is I was working off of production art, not an actual Duga or a line art that's ready to be painted, which means there was no indication of what lines should have been different colors. And I just made everything black. And even though I do like how it turned out, there are certain areas where I wish I would have used offsetting colors or maybe even gone in a different direction. I think the tattoos on the face are a good example. I probably wouldn't have done those with a black outline, but rather done the same green that I did the shadows with, and doesn't have like this weird black outline. As well as the details on the bodysuit. I don't mind the black on black, but I feel like that could have been an opportunity to do something a little bit different and make it stand out better. Even some of the lines inside the capes and the cloaks, I do put black inside the purple, and I'm like, maybe I would have gone in a different direction had I planned ahead for that. One of the things I'm always working on is trying to get a smooth paint surface in the back. Animation is all about stacking cells. You really want the back of it to be as smooth as possible so that you can stack multiple cells without having any gaps that might create some weird reflections or shadows. If you notice on Barris, it almost looked like texture or some bubbles or bumps, and that's really just from me going in and filling in holes that I see. I'm sure you've noticed that I use the portkey light to kind of show me what spots I've missed, and I've kind of go back in and fill them. I don't think this is a normal technique though. I've seen some photos of old Korean animation painting studios, and they didn't have any of these things in place. But I tend to spend a little bit more time on one of these, as opposed to someone who has to do maybe 30, 40 of these to make up a sequence. I've noticed on some of the cells that are in my collection that when they're actually held up against the background, there is a little bit of transparency, opacity kind of to it, where you can kind of see and sometimes see the background. And I think this is why, especially think back to the last episode or last video I released, they use black at the end and they just kind of like lather the back with the color just to kind of make sure none of that light gets through. However, I do want to be honest here, and sometimes I don't necessarily think it's something that I'm doing wrong. Sometimes, despite the fact that I shake and mix thoroughly the paint, if you notice on the green row part of Luminara, it's not a consistent color, and so sometimes I don't have a choice but to go over it. I've started creating this like color chart sheet in order to kind of try and find a color in order to match things. Unfortunately, this time around, I did end up mixing colors, which, yes, I hate mixing colors, but I thought it was necessary because none of the colors that are currently available were really working for these characters. I really do like mixing with toon tones. I find it just it creates the better colors for mixing, but you'll see here that this is one of the problems I have with it. One of the things I noticed on Luminara here is that she does have a lot of air bubbles, or they look like little specks, and that's caused from mixing. You can do your best, you can slow mix. I use a lighter to pop a lot of the bubbles, but whenever you mix, this is it just seems to be part of the process. And this is why I try not to mix. However, with the limited choice out there, you're probably gonna have to mix. But it's just one of those things that I've noticed over and over again. Doesn't matter what I seem to do, whether I add when I'm mixing paint or even when I'm mixing solution, you will get air bubbles. I've tried mixing over time, but then it just kind of separates sometimes, so it's not always the best option. It's just one of those struggles. I'm constantly trying to find out what's the best practice. I really have to give it to the design team of the Clone Wars. These characters are incredibly expressive, yet relatively simple. Before the big reveal, let's go into a vinyl collects from the Clone Wars animated series. This is an original Duga, I guess you could call it, of C-3PO and R2-D2. Both R2 and C-3PO's heads are inked. The bodies are held, so you'll see a little H on the bottom. That indicates that it's a hold frame. Now this series wasn't cell animated, but I guess for the selling of the artwork, they made these collector's edition cells, or one-of-one cells, to show you what it would look like. I can't tell you if they were painted or not because it stuck to the background, but judging from the line art, I'm tending to think that it probably wasn't. And this is an original production background from the Clone Wars animated series. What you're seeing in front of it is a clone troopers that I painted in a previous video. It's kind of funny thing about being a collector is that sometimes, despite your best efforts, sometimes you lose track of what you have. And I completely forgot that I have 2 backgrounds from the same scene. And that's why I'm pointing out here the different numbers, because I didn't know this. And when I went through my collection, I was like, I thought I already recorded this one. And then I look back and I'm like, I look back at the footage I had shot earlier for that Kenobi series and I'm like, oh no, that's a different background. The one thing I can't express enough about these painted scenes, and I think they're done with watercolor or some sort of poster color, is just how amazing they really are. I have such an appreciation and love of the craft of what they're doing with these backgrounds. And this is the background that I found in my collection. It's a very similar setup in terms of what's going on, but it is a different background and it's equally as amazing to look at. I've been told that they moved to digital backgrounds for the second volume, but these original backgrounds that they made for the show are just absolutely phenomenal. And this is another background from the Clone Wars animated series. All of these are from Lucasfilm. I didn't buy directly from them, I got them from a seller, and just once again, let's admire the amazing detail and beauty of it. You can barely see a brush stroke on it. You'll notice on the left-hand side, there's a bit of, it looks like someone put their hand down or something. I don't know if that affected what was on screen or whether that was damage done afterwards. I really love the reds and subtle blues and greens in this piece, so I've chosen it as my background for my Luminara I'm Barris. I would have changed up a few things if I'd done this again, but I'm still very pleased with how it turned out. The Clone Wars was well executed and well done, and I don't want to take anything away from it because it's an amazing animation, but there's still a part of me that wishes it was cel painted. And every time I revisit it, I wish it had come out about 10 years earlier. Thanks for watching. I'm Brian, and this is Vinyl Paints.